I would just love to know your origin story and literally what kind of got you to like this point right now.
I would describe my life as biblical. When God takes a piece of crap and puts that piece of crap through the furnace to become something else. Um, I am a life coach, as you know, as you said, and I just think this was my calling in life. This was my path. I I took all my experiences and I amalgamated them into what I do, which is why I believe I'm so good at what I do. I had a difficult um, childhood, not because of anything that normal people would probably talk about. I had parents, I had a roof over my head, I had all those things. But the difficulty of something is how you deal with it mentally. That's the real issue with everybody. So I I went through my own mental struggles, and really the pattern is rhythmic in people. Everything we ever do, every problem we have, all stems from our childhood because it's our first part of programming, which was in my own life. I didn't really learn to read and write until I was about 19. But you wouldn't know that now because I'm so academically fluent, but it's something that I really wanted to do. So, being black, obviously, being young, being illiterate, I struggled with identity at school. But it's something that I didn't actually really admit to myself until I got older in life. So, what I struggled with is what most men and people struggle with. It's finding who you are and finding why you are. So I went from kind of not being able to do much but wanting to, then to being a high risk mediator, having my own business, consulting for businesses, working with rich and wealthy people, working with athletes and celebrities, because I took my own experience and I amalgamated it. And as I said, with the grace of God, I now help people with what I've struggled with.
Hmm. What was your first, um, I'd say, bit of communication with your parents? I mean, what like did they used to say like to you that literally made you feel a certain way?
I didn't really talk a lot. I didn't talk about how I felt. I've never really spoken about how I felt. And I have quite a lot of sisters and a brother, and it was a lot, same old story for most people. Lots of people, small house, growing up, and I'm the youngest. So I was affected by experience. Um, I didn't talk and I wasn't honest and truthful about how I felt. So the interaction with my parents wasn't really in any great detail. I was often on my own quite a lot. And actually, just thinking about the question you've asked me, I've never really asked myself that question before. And I can't really think of that much interaction. Love my mom. She's not very well at the moment. Love my mom. Loved her growing up. Really close to her. Real mommy's boy. Um, but there was not real communication in terms of how we feel, how I feel, what I'm doing. It wasn't like that. It, yeah, it wasn't like that.
Hmm. And like if you kind of don't like mind me asking,
Yeah.
you didn't say nothing about your dad.
Yeah. Um, funny enough. So my dad passed away when I was, so I'm 43 now. My dad passed away when I was 17, and we didn't really have a relationship. I know that might sound weird to some people, but when you have a Jamaican parents back then and a Jamaican dad, they didn't really talk much. They didn't talk much, but I understand why they didn't talk much. And I didn't talk much to him, and he didn't talk much to me. Not that there was a problem, that's just the way how it was. So I don't really recall, I can only probably recall two conversations that I ever had with him, just two. one when he was dying, and one when he gave me a lift down the road. That was it, really. Yeah.
Um, do, do you think the like passing away of your father affected you in, I'd say, from the ages of 17 to your early 20s? I mean, how was you like at school and college
Okay.
when that happened?
So no, I don't think it affected me at the time. I think it affected me later on in life. It affected me when I came into consciousness of being alive, as it were, of the reality of life. Then it affected me. Um, Being at school and at college, I didn't do much. I wasn't really able to do much at the time. But you would never know that because of my achievements later on have been massive. But at the time, they wasn't. As I said, I couldn't really read and write that well. I struggled academically. I struggled socially. Um, I played basketball. That's what I done. That was my escape. I was really good at basketball. I dominated that sport, and that's what gave me the drive. Once you're good at something in your life and you know what success and victory tastes like, you will always chase that, always. And I did. I wanted to be good at things. I wanted to be good at something, and I never stopped until I was good at something, which I'm good at my profession now. But going through those years, those teenage years, was very difficult because I didn't talk to anyone and I didn't know how to talk to anyone. I had a, like most people, I had issues, but I didn't know what those issues were. So it was only later on in life did I find out what they were and why they were. And I found that out when I got to 29. That's when I realized I've got to sort this out here. So Jim Carrey describes it as deep rest, depression. He calls it as deep rest, and I needed that deep rest. I needed to reflect on my whole life, and it took me years to really understand myself, and that's how I became so good at what I do because I had to unturn every single stone, the ones that I wasn't comfortable with. You have to be honest with yourself, as I said, accepting my reality, accepting my past. Those are the things that gave me a present and a future.
It was very telling just by listening to your story, when like you was talking at the beginning. I don't know. I mean, again, like I could be wrong,
Yeah.
but there was like a lot of no, it wasn't a lot, but there was a little bit more hesitancy. But the moment
Mm.
you start to talk about basketball and
Yeah.
meaning, your
Mhm.
demeanor and your tone changed.
Yeah.
You sounded a lot more dominant.
Yeah.
I- is that kind of something that you kind of also tell and actually speak to regarding your clients in terms of talking about trauma and literally owning your strengths as well?
Yeah. So, have you ever seen a film called The Life of Pi?
With the lion and the man in
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah. The
have,
Lion and the
have
Thing on the Bus.
sorry, the lion and the boy. I've not seen it.
Yeah.
Or is
Okay.
is it the lion or tiger?
It's some kind of animal. It's some kind of
Yeah,
animal.
I've not
Um,
seen it.
okay. Well, there's a quote on that film that I think is one of the greatest quotes ever, and it says, "Hunger will change everything you think you know about yourself as a person." It's one of the deepest quotes I've ever heard in my life, and I was hungry as a human being, and if you don't manage your hunger, you will eat things that you shouldn't, metaphorically speaking, because you want to get there, and this is why so many people end up in situations that they never wanted to be in. It was because of hunger. I'll get back to that point. The other film was Slumdog Millionaire. I don't know if you've ever seen that film,
Yeah, I've seen
but
it.
the guy basically answers all the questions because somewhere in his life he has been through it. As a life coach, th- I feel like everything anyone had ever brought to me, somewhere in my life, I have been through that. So with basketball, going back to your question, with basketball, as a kid, I was lost. Basketball was the only thing at the time that saved my life. I I can't stand the sport. I can't stand basketball, and I lived for it because this was the irony. I was playing basketball because it was the only thing I was ever good at, and I I would play before school. I'd play after school. I would go out in the rain and play. And what many people didn't know is that every time I felt stressed and sad and upset, I would take the ball and I would go and I would dribble. I would just dribble everywhere. I'd spend hours. I, I, it was hours a day, weekends, nights, just dribbling everywhere. And I remember I was dribbling once, and it was in the winter, and it was about 7 o'clock, so it was pitch black, and I dropped the ball, and I had a black basketball, and I dropped it, and it took me 45 minutes to find it again. And I never forget this. I said to myself, "What lesson have you learned here?" And I said to myself, "Don't ever drop the ball." So I went and played in the dark again every night just so I didn't drop the ball. My handles were ridiculous, ridiculous, and I was so good at that. So at 17, I had stopped playing. I didn't realize it now, but I was going through depression. I didn't realize it, but now I know. And I stopped playing basketball. So I lost the very thing that I had because I'd left school, and it was a really difficult time. Like I'd gone through a really hard time mentally. Pulling myself out of that time gave me the experience. Lessons learned here. Everyone needs something in life. Everyone needs something to have an orgasmic experience. Let me explain that. We are creatures built for orgasmic experiences. And what an orgasm is, it's when mind, spirit, body, and soul come together to have an experience and agree. It's nothing to do with sexual. It's not. It's when you have an alignment within yourself. So if you speak to anyone, and I'll challenge you to do this, speak to anyone who says that they're depressed, and you'll find that they do not have an orgasmic experience where everything aligns in one, and that's what causes the depression. They're not in line. You ask anyone and speak to them, and you'll see.
What question can I ask someone that
Mm,
that actually says that they like feel depressed for like me to know if they have
yeah,
that
alignment
orgasmic feeling?
experience. Okay. Um, Ask them what they do for fun. Ask them what they enjoy. Ask them what they do for themselves. Ask them what they would do if they could do anything in the world. What would they do? And what you'll start to see is a pattern in their life. And a lot of them will say, "I don't know. I've never thought about it." Or they'll go, "I'll probably go and watch the football, probably go," and there's no enthusiasm. Now, you ask someone who isn't depressed, ask them the same questions. And when they talk, they'll talk from their gut. So I'll ask you, what do you enjoy doing?
I enjoy playing football. I enjoy creating content, meeting amazing people,
Okay.
and
So
actually,
you see, those answers are at the forefront of your head. You know where they are. They're in your conscious and subconscious. You don't have to dig deep in your mind and pull them out. They're there, which means that you will have the experience. So you know when you go on the football pitch, you're going to enjoy this. When you're making content, you're going to enjoy this. Your body knows what you're going to enjoy. Someone who's depressed doesn't know. It's in the back of their mind. So I know this isn't the question that we're on, but take depression. It's when the mind cannot see a way out of its situation. So it's when the mind gives up. So, for example, if there was a house with 20 rooms and you lose your keys, and you go up and you search room one, room two, room three, room four, all the way to 20, and you can't find them and come back downstairs. Then you do it again, room one, room two, room three, and you do it 10 times. There's going to come a time when, even if you want to search, your mind's going to say to you, "There's no point. I've
mm,
looked." So now the battle becomes between your mind telling you that you can't find the keys and your mind saying to you, "Well, let's just have a look." And eventually, one of them's going to win. And it's probably going to be the mind that says the keys aren't there. So you're going to be sitting there now like this. That's an example of how depression works. The mind has given up before the body does.
what was the worst piece of advice you got told at school?
Um, I hardly. The worst piece of advice is probably you can you can be anything you want to be, because what we really should say is it's not what you want to be, it's what you're prepared to work for. If you're not prepared to work for it, you're not going to be. Because if I think I can be a football player, so you're telling me now I can be anything I want to be. Okay, I want to be a football player. I'm going to go and train once a week. You're not going to be a football player. Are you prepared to work every day in some way, shape, or form? No, I'm not. Well, then you won't be a football player. So, what great advice would be, you will get what you're prepared to work for. So, understand the preparation before you set your desire on the finished product. And that's what we keep telling people. You know, I don't think young people actually have a purpose anymore. It- it- what purpose do young people have? They are more valuable as consumers than they are being productive. We need people to like, share, and follow. We need people to sit in front of a screen and watch and get views up. We need that more than we need people to be productive. Years ago, we needed factory workers, we needed frontline people, we needed people to have an education and be productive. You can have a career by being stupid. You can have a career by showing what you can't do. So it's really hard when young people say, I feel lost. I feel for them, because they're in a time now where you can make more money by being lost and be more famous than you actually can being productive.
Mm. You've like mentioned around like the age of, well, you didn't start to read and write
Yeah,
comfortably
yeah,
until the age of 19
yeah,
upwards.
yeah.
What was the I'd say like the kind of tipping point um, for you to literally make that conscious decision?
Decision. Okay. Because I was so good at a sport, I knew what it done to the brain and what it done to you as a person. And I wanted to feel like that again. I wanted to feel um, human. So I was in the car about 19 um, and had in the car 19 um, and I was crying. I was crying my eyes out because you probably won't hear it now, or you may hear it, but I have a speech impediment, and I stuttered really badly, really badly. I managed to sort it out, but I stuttered really badly. So imagine if I'd phoned up for a job interview, when they said hello, I was stuttering, so I couldn't talk. So oftentimes they would just put the phone down. So then I'm really upset about it now. I wouldn't tell anyone about this. I wouldn't have spoken about this, before. So I was sitting in the car crying. And I remember BBC Radio 4 was on, and I was listening to a show called Ed Doolan. Um, and this guy was talking, and when he was talking, he was so fluently articulate. I remember turning the radio up and listening to him. I remember saying, I want to be able to do that. So I'd sit in the car for hours and just listen to him talk, and I would say what he said. I just keep copying what he said, and I kept doing it over and over and over again, and I couldn't retain anything. So what I'd done was I started watching TV shows and trying to make notes on what they were saying. And then after the show, I would try and read it to see if I could make sense of what was going on. I just wanted to be good. I just would not settle for not being good. So I'd done everything I could. I mean, everything I could. I would go and try and talk to people, have a conversation to get over the nervousness and stop stuttering. So what I'm telling you now, I have people who've been my friends for my whole life who don't know any of this because I just didn't talk, and I don't really talk. Even now, I don't really talk, to be honest.
What did your speech impediment? What superpower did your speech impediment give you?
The ability to extend my vocabulary. So if I'm talking to you and I wanted to say, have a great day, and I would go, oh no, I couldn't say the word great day. So I would say, I hope you have an extraordinary time. I'd have to change the word. If I got stuck on extraordinary time, I would turn around and say, I hope today brings everything you want it to bring. If I was stuck on that, I would say, I hope your dreams come true this afternoon. I'd have to keep changing the words all the time so I didn't get stuck. I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but it just gave me a much bigger vocabulary.
I would love to understand and to know when you knew that life coaching was for you.
Um, t- so there was a couple of occasions. One, I was going through a really difficult time, and one of my friends turned around to me and said, "You know, you need a life coach." And I was like, "What's that?" And he told me about it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And then a friend left my house about it was years ago. He came over and sat down and had a conversation for 3 hours. He'd always pop over. He'd be like, "Oh, can I come over?" I'd be like, "Yeah." And then he'd leave the house, and one day he was stretching on the drive and was like, "Oh, great." I was like, "What's great?" And he was like, "Just every time I come over and see you, I just leave and my life's fine." And I was like, "Okay." But I've always worked with people without even knowing. So the two earliest occasions was one of my best friends in the world. I was about 13. I was playing basketball. His name's Dean. I still see him all the time. And he said to me, "How do you do that?" And I was like, "What?" He said, how do you manage to move the ball so quickly and still keep control of it?" So I taught him how to do that. He became one of the best national players around. And the other occasion was I was again playing basketball about 17, took the ball to the park, I was dribbling around, and these two boys came over to me, and one of them asked me the same question, "How do you do that with the ball?" And I said, "Well, I said it's easy. You just got to bounce it and you got to put it through your fingers and feel it through all your fingers." He's like, "But how can I do it?" And I said, "It's easy." And I explained to him again. And he said, "But how can I do it?" And I explained again. He said, "No, look." And he held his hands up and he only had two fingers. That was my first ever experience of physical indifference. My first ever. And I'll never forget it. And I was taken back by it, but I never wanted him to feel like he couldn't. So I said to him, "You just use what you have, do what I do with the two fingers you have." And I showed him how to do it. That I was, no, yeah, no, I was 19. That experience changed my life because it showed me how different people are. And then again, if I'm being honest with you, I think it's a gift. I think what I do with people, it's a gift. I'd love to sit here and say, "Oh, I've done this, that, all the qualifications I've done and all the experience I've got." It's a gift, really.
What is something that you struggle with?
Um, I'm not taking my time here because I don't struggle with anything. I struggle with as much as everyone else does in life. I don't think human beings are good or bad. I think we are circumstantial, but I think we are inherently destructive. And we fail to remember that we are circumstantial. I don't judge anyone for anything they do. I have sat down with people who have committed the most horrendous crimes in the world. I've sat down with people who are billionaires and I have done the same thing with them. Everything is circumstantial. And I'll give you an example, then I'll answer your question. If I drive down the road and I see an old woman who has fallen over and I get out of my car and I help her, do you think that makes me a good person?
Yes.
Okay. I get back in my car, I drive down the road, I see another old woman at a crossing, and I just run her over and drive home and eat my dinner. Does that make me a bad person?
If you run her over, yes.
Okay. Okay, so one hand I've helped one, I'm a good person. One hand I've knocked one over, I'm a bad person. Overall, which am I? Am I good or bad?
I would say overall, you would be a good person.
But what about the woman that I knocked over?
You don't know the circumstances why she was in the middle of the road for you
But
to knock her over.
but I seen her. I just couldn't bother to stop. I wanted to get home.
Okay.
See, it becomes a difficult one because how many? If now I'm a bad person, how many good things do I have to do to now take away the bad I've done? And vice versa. How much bad do I have to do to take away the good? David Beckham is the golden boy. Then he kicks someone in a World Cup. Then he's the world's most hated person. Then he scores a free kick. Then he's loved. So what are we? We are just circumstantial. That's what we are. And when we think we're more than that, that becomes the problem. People then become surprised when we see our favorite celebrities. We find out that they've been molesting children, or they've done embezzlement, or they killed someone. All of a sudden, we don't like them. We never knew them. We didn't know these people. So we shouldn't be surprised. What I struggle with is what every human being struggles with, life in general, just emotions. We all have good days, we have bad days, we struggle with family, friends, loved ones, going to work, coming home, bills, when we're tired, health. But it's not what we're going through, it's how we deal with it mentally. We come back to the present. If I have a bad day outside and I come in, I have to sit down and go, I can't let that time define who I am. It's who do I want to be? I want to be honest. I want to be truthful. I want to be peaceful. I want to be upstanding. If I remember who I want to be and what I want to be, I will come back to that and I try and leave the struggles behind. I did struggle with life and I struggled with letting things go and accepting them, accepting that I'm just human. So once I understood what acceptance was, life became a little bit easier.
When was the last time you cried?
Um, was it yesterday? Yesterday, yesterday, I cried because I was watching something. I'll tell you what I was watching. I've seen it before. I wasn't watching it. I don't. I'm always doing work and got something on in the background. And I'll tell you what it was actually. Ironically, it was. Have you ever seen a program called Ozark?
Yeah.
It was the scene where Ruth was trying to um, launder money and she didn't have Marty's software, so she couldn't do it. And her brother Wyatt had said to her, "You'll figure it out, you will." And
Yeah.
Ruth had turned around and said, "Why do you think that?" And he turned around and said, "Because you're Ruth Langmore." It made me teary, and I'll tell you why it made me teary. Because forget that it's a program, but look at the program. You have a woman who's come from a trailer, who has nothing, who had nothing. She's lost her uncle, she's lost her dad, she's lost everything and everyone around her, but she never gives up on life. She's always trying. And at one moment of her life, she doubted herself. And her brother reminded her of who she was. And it made me teary because we all need at times to remember who we are and what we've been through. And when we do, we'll know the strength. Someone will turn around and say, "Do you know who I am?" No, you have to remember who you are. You're an overcomer. You've been through trauma. You've been through depression. You've been through stress. You've been through death. No one really knows what someone's been through in life. Sometimes when you sit down and you remind yourself, I am, that's when you give yourself a kick. There's a famous scripture that says, David encouraged himself in the Lord. When you encourage yourself, it's the biggest superpower you can have to pick yourself up and say, I can do this. It's the biggest thing that we can do. If you find that ability, it doesn't matter who's against you. A ship can never sink with no matter how much water is on the outside. If you let water get on the inside, you're done for. Don't ever let that water get in here. Don't ever let that negativity, that doubt, what you think you can't do. And that's what Ruth done. And what Wyatt done, he put the plug in and he stopped the water from coming in the boat. Crying is essential. Crying is essential, just like having a number one, having a number two, sweating. It's a part of us. I believe crying is like a heavenly language. If you cry, you get out your most deepest emotions, and that's what men don't do enough. Men don't cry. We don't get out that waste, that garbage. Women will openly, but men don't. You ask a man when they cry, they can't tell you. I try and cry all the time, as much as I can, because I need to get out whatever's in there. It's really silly. I'll, I'll tell you something really, really silly. But I went to the cinema years ago, and I seen a film called Brother Bear. I'll never forget it. It was years ago, and at the end of this film, um, the bear ran towards the boy, and I had a breakdown in the cinema. I had to go to the toilet. I was crying in there I mean, hysterically. Only years later, I realized why. And this just goes back to my dad. I didn't have that with him. And as a man, now I know I needed that with him. And that's why it was having that link. It was me accepting what's upsetting me. Drop the manly stuff and all. What's upsetting me? What's hurting me? And I had to become honest and truthful with my situation. And some of us don't want to do that. So that's when I cried last to answer your question.
What is the biggest piece of advice or knowledge that you want to pass down to your son, daughter, or your family in general?
My biggest advice that I'd pass down to anyone, yes, my son and yes, my daughter, but I pass it down to anyone because we are all responsible for each other. So just because I didn't birth him or her doesn't mean that they're not my children. And I think what we should stop doing is seeing our children as being our children and their children as being their children. Our lives will always cross. So we should all treat all boys like our sons and all girls like our daughters. And what I would say to anyone is, it's hard to generally sum it up, but you just you love yourself. It's the most important thing to do in the world is to love yourself. Not to be a lover of yourself, which is loving yourself in the third person, but to love yourself and find other people who love themselves. Advice that we give to people: find someone who loves you. No, find someone who loves themselves. Because if I love you and you hurt me, I am now going to treat you for how you've treated me. If I love myself and you hurt me, I won't treat you any different because I love myself. I have my own integrity, my own honesty, my own self respect. If you love yourself, you'll put yourself first, and then everything else will fall in line. Feed yourself first before you feed other people. Learn to have your own gratification. If you seek gratification from other people, then you're always going to be wanting and needing from someone else.
Leon, where can people find you?
You can find me on my website, which is www.lifecoachleon.com. And I think I'm on Instagram. I think it's Leon Gordon 2020, but I'm actually changing that soon, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be there. But I'm on my website, and you can contact me. Something that you didn't ask me that I'm going to say.
Okay.
So I went through a really big mental battle when I was 29, right? And it was really difficult. And we haven't got time to talk about it now.
We do have
But
time. We
okay,
do have time. If I mean, again, I'm going to be working on your schedule,
okay,
so we have time.
okay. So I'm gonna tell you why it's super relevant. because so yeah, about 29, and again, most people don't know this. Not that they should. I'm no one important. So when I was 29, and I tell this story. Sorry, I'm diverting, but I tell this story to people because I think the problem is that we're not honest enough. I am in and out of people's lives all the time, and I see the reality of what people go through. Society portrays perfection. The idea of perfection is what's killing people. We can never be perfect because time is continuous and we are driven by emotion. So whatever you think is perfect is changing over time. Dust is life's saw chaining through our reality. So I like to tell honest, true stories because it helps people. No one's perfect. I've been to the richest people's houses and the poorest people's houses, and everyone is struggling. And the more we see perfection on social media, is the more we think it's attainable, achievable. It's not achievable because it changes. So I'm 29, and something triggers me, and I go into basically I get I get I'm just really struggling, and I am dying here, but I didn't tell anyone. I am dying here. I'm struggling with everything, and I'm going to and from the hospital, right? And in the end, the nurse sits down with me and says, "Listen, you have anxiety," and I'm like, "I don't," and she's like, "Why do you think that?" I said, "Because people like me can't get anxiety. It's impossible." And she was like, "You have?" So we're having this argument in the hospital. I'm like, "You need to go and get someone else in here who knows what they're talking about." And she's like, "I'm telling you, you have anxiety." And I'm like, "It's impossible." I refuse to believe it. And I went home I googled it, and she was right. I had anxiety. Um, and people are like, "Oh, I've got anxiety." If you have anxiety, you're gonna have stress and depression. They don't really cut it. It doesn't come as one, and we try and segregate it. It's when your mind is saying, "I can't do this anymore. I can't do it." So I go through this for years. I mean, like, unless I'm telling you, you would never know. But I went through it for years, and it was really bad. It was really bad to the point where I'm like, I can't take this anymore. I can't take it. I cannot take it. It,
As
yeah.
in, as in, you don't want to be here anymore.
Oh, yeah. I listen. If there was an exit door, I was going through. I was looking for it. You know that point where you wake up every morning for the first 2 seconds, your conscious and subconscious haven't connected yet, and then when it connects, bang! I'm having tears in my eyes because I am crying because I woke up again. It was really bad. Anyway, th- anyway, the point that I wanted to get at was after years of hiding it from everyone and just being very different, I had gone to the doctors in the end. I'm like, I cannot deal with this. So there's a difference between having um anxiety and an anxiety disorder. Sorry, panic attacks and anxiety disorder. Having a panic attack is where something may trigger you and you'll panic. Having an anxiety disorder is when you live in a conscious state of anxiousness. You live in it all the time, and there's a difference. Having a panic attack is everyone can have a panic attack, but and having an anxiety disorder is life changing, and that's what I had. And I'd wake up out of my sleep 26, 27 times a night, not being able to breathe. I couldn't just, it was just life changing. It was just life changing. I could tell you the ins and outs, but it'd take a really long time. But so anyway, in the end, I'd gone to the doctors, all right. After about 3 years of struggling with this, I've gone to the doctors. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm done. I can't take it. Whatever you've got to give me to take, I'll take. And he sat there and he listened to me. He said, "What's the problem?" And I told him the problem, told him everything. I mean, in great detail. I'm in tears, told him everything. And he's got his computer screen and he's turned it away from me. He's looked at me and he's gone, "Shut your mouth. Shut up." And I'm just sitting there. He said, get out of my office and the doctor's surgery, and don't come back until you sort yourself out. So I did. He saved my life. He saved my life. Many people would look and go, they're going to sue the doctor. It was terrible. He saved my life. I struggled again for another 3 months, and I was in a mess. I've gone back to the doctors, and I seen a different doctor, and he wrote a prescription out for me and gave it to me. And I looked at the prescription. I remember one time I was at home and I was so bad, and I picked up a tablet and I had the water, and I remembered what the doctor said to me, and I threw the tablet and threw the water and threw all of it, and I said, I'm not going to do it. Then I realized what the problem was. I kept asking myself, what's happening to me? But the question was, why is it happening to me? That's when my whole life changed. If you're going through something mentally, there's a reason. It doesn't just happen. There is a reason. And the reason was, it started off in my childhood, and I had to go back. I had to go back and undo. It took me 10 years to go back. I studied myself. I studied mental health. I studied therapy. I studied life coaching. I studied books while still going through it. I studied everything, and I realized. So I got to the point where I literally had agoraphobia, and I couldn't leave the house. I didn't go out the house for, I couldn't even tell you. And when I went out, I had to come back in. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I've got to beat this now. So I said to my partner at the time, I need to go out. So I said, take me to town. Which said she was worried because of what I was like. I said, no, I'm gonna do it. I remember putting on Eric Thomas, How Bad Do You Want to Breathe? I was playing it all the time. And I went, had a blanket over my head, breathing in a bag, went to town, and I said, just leave me here, leave me. I said, two things are gonna happen. You're either gonna come back and I'm gonna be in a body bag, or you're gonna go back home and I'm gonna be all right. So I went to town, and I stood in the middle of town with hundreds of people walking towards me, with tears streaming down my face, gasping for air. Hundreds of people just looking at me. And I got to the point where I was about to pass out. And when I was about to pass out, I just had a massive gasp of air. And I was like, got ya, got ya. I now know I have beat you. I know I have. And I went home. And what I would do is I would put myself every day in the most hardest, uncomfortable situations I could every day. I mean, the most difficult ones that you could imagine, in people, around people, talking to people, because I had to beat that cognitive feeling of I can't do this. And I did. And listen, if you know me without knowing this story, some people still don't believe that I went through that. And if I tell you the great detail, some people are like, I just don't believe it because it was that bad. If I could have, listen, so I dedicated my whole life to understanding mental health. Most people don't understand mental health. They don't know what it is, and that's why they can't. And this is the contradiction. Sorry, that's why they can't help people. So this is the contradiction, right? We now agree that mental health issues exist. But at the same time, we say there's no such thing as normal. So if there's no such thing as normal, then no one has a mental health problem. Just think about what I'm saying. In order for there to be issues with mental health, what we're saying is there's a mental health that we should have and aspire to. You can't say something's wrong unless you know something's right. So there has to be a way that we have to live, and that's right. Because if there's not, then no one has a mental health issue. If you see a car upside down on its back, we know it's on its back because we know what it should be. So how can you say someone has a problem with mental health if there isn't such a thing as normal? So think about this. I say I can't go outside because I'm scared. Someone's going to tell me, well, you should be able to go outside. So what if I say no? Well, that's normal. They're going to tell me that's not normal. So there is a normal then. Going outside and being able to walk around and talking in front of people, that's normal. If I can't do that, you're going to say that it's not normal. So because we're telling people that there's not a normal, people are walking around not well and think that's okay. So you can't have. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There has to be a normal. There has to be a way that we should live. There has to be a right. There has to be a wrong. Otherwise, no one has a mental health issue. Nobody does.
Leon, thank you so much for sharing.
No problem.
I think this is going to be. I think we'll be definitely having a lot more conversations on and offline.
Yeah.
And again, thank you for being so candid and transparent with your story. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you.
And again, please like and subscribe, and we will see everyone next week.